As Providence goes, so goes the state. So let's check into the city of Providence for the new year. How are you doing on the music?
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
Dan McGowan is in the house. If it's happening in Providence, he knows about it, and it's important that we kind of set the scene for 2018. There's some political movement in the city and some tragic news to start the new year as well. We'll get into that momentarily. Great to have you aboard. Thanks for checking in with us. Let's just kind of check in on a couple of other things. First, the president had a very unique day yesterday, no doubt about it. Don't you agree? He conducted this bipartisan, bicameral, House and Senate meeting around the table. And the reporters were there, and usually that's something that's, 4 or 5 minutes, and then everybody scoots, and then they have the real meeting, and they, kill each other. In this particular case, it was near an hour's worth of live television as they had a meeting that evolved, and the president was all over the map. The DACA legislation that is, due by early March, if we're not going to send kids packing or at least put them in illegal status, has to go with border security. But then again, maybe we ought to do DACA alone. But then again, you know what? Whatever you guys come up with.
Positions are going to be what the people in this room come up with. I am very much reliant on the people in this room. I know most of the people on both sides. I have a lot of respect for the people on both sides. And what I approve is going to be very much reliant on what the people in this room come to me with. I have great confidence in the people. If they come to me with things that I'm not in love with, I'm going to do it because I respect them.
And, whatever they give me, I'll sign it. Okay. Clearly, this is a reaction to fire and fury. Look, I can run a meeting, but the longer he goes, the more we run the meeting all over the place. So really it comes down to Democrats and Republicans trying to iron this whole thing out, and Democrats are not playing ball either. So it's not just the Republicans that are hardened in this particular case. And of course, Democrats don't like it when spending authorizations, continuing resolutions, meaning keeping the government open, are tied to other issues, but they went ahead and tied DACA to it. So it's mutual bad behavior going on there. But the pressure's on, and a judge today issued a stay on that DACA protection temporarily. So it's all up in the air. We will have a conversation about this with a local expert on the deferred action for childhood arrivals tomorrow here on the broadcast, so tune in for that. In the meantime, at home, the Paw Sox are crawling toward a stadium vote in the House where the whole thing will reset itself, right? The Senate Finance Committee, which authorized the new amendments and the brand new legislation, voted with only one no vote yesterday to pass this thing. And of course, some of the same script evolved in front of them before they cast their votes.
Testimony Tuesday was brief following a series of public hearings this fall.
It's a risk, even if we're lucky and the deal actually does work out.
Some say the investment wouldn't help with declining ticket sales.
I do not think a new stadium subsidized by the taxpayers in Pawtucket is going to bring that back.
Others in favor.
I feel that tonight is the time to bring this to fruition.
So, the guy in the middle there, Steve Frias, honest to God, he kind of holds a lot of the cards in this whole statewide debate. He's the man who ran against Nick Mattiello and came 85 votes short of beating Nick Mattiello, the Speaker of the House, in the last 2016 election. Now, listen, it's crawling all over the State House that Frias has been offered a deal not to run. I think it's something that we're going to have to ask Steve Frias about, and we will sooner than later. He says that he's going to make his decision as to whether he's running for office in District 15 based on the behavior of Nick Mattiello. So he's kind of holding this Paw Sox thing over his head with the notion that 2 out of 3, his number, 2 out of 3 voters in Cranston's District 15 are vehemently against the public financing or any of their part of it with the stadium. And to that I say, baloney. You might ask them now and they say, yeah, whatever. You think they're going to hold that against anybody coming up in November in Pawtucket from Cranston with all that will be going on in a governor's race? who's kidding who here? The drama is just way too much. However, the Speaker of the House is knee-buckled over the whole thing. So what happens is the Finance Committee authorized it yesterday. Come early next week, the Senate will probably pass it because they wouldn't put the vote up if they didn't count the, count the votes in advance. And then it goes to the House, where it'll be like this, as the Speaker, studies his own navel over the whole thing. By the way, the Speaker, the Senate President, and the Governor are scheduled to be in here back to back to back, not next week, but the week after. There ought to be a lot of heat in the kitchen come that time. And of course, the Governor will have offered her State of the State by that time, or the budget address, or something like that. In the meantime, amongst the things she's going to be talking about is the school conditions. Gee, all it takes is a deep freeze to really bring this crystallized for everybody. Here's a tweet from the Treasurer who, brings attention to it. And of course, he's been talking about it because he's worked on the package of finance for it.
Not all of our schools are safe. Not all of our schools have the facilities that we need to train kids for the 21st century workforce. So what we have today is a plan that will fix these schools, make our schools, all schools in Rhode Island, warm, safe, and dry within the next 10 years, and also equip them with modern learning facilities.
You've done a lot of work on this. Welcome. Happy New Year, buddy.
Happy New Year. Thanks for having me.
Warm, safe, and dry is the cliche.
Yeah.
It's the national mantra and the local cliche as well, right?
Right. That's right. It's a thing that people, experts and the people who handle these school buildings, they talk about warm, safe, and dry all the time. They say, according to a study that was done earlier this year, last year, about $600 million in repairs needed to just get to get to warm, safe, and dry is needed. So.
That's a lot of dough.
It's a lot of dough.
We have done a terrible job maintaining our schools.
That's right.
This is. Where are we going with this whole thing? I mean, what is the governor going to put up? What do you think?
My gut is she's going to put in her budget proposal let's put this on the ballot type of thing that has to go through the legislature. But given the attention that this week and the last week of schools have been getting, things like that. It'd be surprising to see it fail. I think you'll put $250 million on the ballot, in November. Maybe another $250 million the next election, and there's where you get your $500 million that they want to start with.
Start with.
Yeah. Now remember, there's other money.
$500 million to start with.
Well, remember, so there's $500 million there through borrowing, right? Then there's another right now the state spends about $80 million a year reimbursing cities and towns for the repairs that they make when they have to bond out. So they want to keep that $80 million or maybe even increase it. So if you think about it, you get your money there, your money from the bond, you get your money for the repairs that you're already paying, and then the cities and towns will also, in theory, borrow some money. So you could have closer to $1 billion of borrowing over the next 10 years.
Is there going to be anything that forces the hand of local communities to self-finance maintenance without reimbursement?
Great question, and this is a key component that hasn't been discussed as much as it probably should have. What they're talking about right now is meaning at the state level, they want to really nudge districts, the municipalities along to move quick to make improvements, but we haven't heard a lot about making sure that this doesn't happen again 20 years from now. I would imagine there will need to be, strings attached, things like that. But what happens is, and I see it in Providence every year. Every year you look at, minor problems in schools that you patch up and fix, right? You have a month, maybe 6-week window during the summer to make repairs. You do them as best you can. School starts. Occasionally, you get through the year, no problem. Sometimes you get really big problems. Those problems now have grown so much that we're seeing that now, it's time to actually make the big improvements.
You know what's interesting, though? The city of Providence, which you so well cover, is really almost third world when it comes to the condition of the schools.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I saw, up until, most recently, very little political will to do anything about it. We get a deep freeze last week, and all of a sudden pipes are breaking in Cranston and Warwick. Johnston's got a little problem. The suburbs all of a sudden are finding that they've got to face the music. And all of a sudden there's some really serious momentum. Now look, in fairness, this legislation and this funding thing has been something that's been worked on for months and is being presented pre-storm, pre-freeze.
Right.
but the momentum and attention now.
Oh yeah.
The bias.
Right. Well, I was
when people talk about systemic racial bias, and they talk about all that kind of stuff. There's no such. There's the subtle evidence.
Absolutely.
Don't you think?
No, I think it's a really good point. The number of people who, when I went to every one of these task force meetings as they were fleshing out what they wanted to do, and I'd read a story every time, probably wrote 5, 6 stories. And then after their report came out where they made their recommendations, read a story, and inevitably, whether it's on Facebook or emails, phone calls, you get people who say, well, why should I subsidize Providence? The thing I always say to them is, it's not just a Providence problem, it's a problem everywhere. Now, Providence is the biggest city, it's going to have the biggest number. These problems are in every community in the state, doesn't matter which one. And now you're seeing it. And by the way, I mean, God, it's really unfortunate what's happened the last couple of days in some of these schools, but there's no way to, you couldn't have better timing when it comes to the governor making this proposal. I mean, how could you be opposed to it today?
Makes perfect sense. When we come back, there's some political movement in the city. Dan's all over it next.
Listen to what the needs are in our various neighborhoods and move legislation and measures forward that impact in a positive way the city as a whole and those broad constituencies.
All right, that's David Salvatore, the new city council president, newly elected. Dan McGowan covers the city like a blanket. Pretty decent, honest public official by all accounts to this date, yes?
Yeah, I mean, I've covered him. His rise onto the city council sort of mirrors my, we've had parallel.
Your tenure covering the city?
Parallel trajectories, I suppose. And he's never been, really caught up in any sort of scandal in any way. He's a pretty reasonable guy. I think I wrote, he likes politics. He loves politics. He is a political guy. That's how Providence works. But he likes a good policy conversation just as much as he likes politics, which is really helpful, I think, when it comes to debating the big issues. So.
What's his big thing?
His big thing, and this is in the weeds kind of boring, but his big issue that you'll see him push for in 2018, which remember, he only has 1 year to do this, and then he can run for re-election next time. Or run for president in 2019 is this. He wants to standardize the tax breaks in the city of Providence. Right now, if you want a tax break, you're a developer, you have to go before the city council, you have to negotiate a deal. You want 10 years, maybe you say throw in an 11th year, throw in a 12th year, things like that. He wants to basically create a process, and the mayor supports this, that would give you your tax break based on the amount of, largely on the amount of construction costs that you're going to have. Makes sense, though there's plenty of arguments against it. There are a lot of the progressives and liberals are strongly against it. They say, you're just going to enhance the number of tax breaks in the city. You're going to see stuff like that. But that's his big issue.
Well, listen, standardizing that is an economic development tool that brings consistency and can eliminate, corruption.
Absolutely.
Worries about it. I mean, to this day, the 195 redevelopment land has no set rate card. If you're in Poughkeepsie or Des Moines and you're thinking, hey, you know what, we might want to set up shop in Providence. I hear it's cool. You look up this 195 redevelopment area, there is no rate card.
That's right.
None.
Right. That's right. And you remember a couple of years ago, speaking of the Providence case of this, on the 195 land, there was a really big push, and it actually ended up passing to standardize. So you do have a little bit of a rate card, at least on what you're going to potentially have to pay over the course of many years. So there is a standardized tax break for the 195 land. Problem is it's still, you're still having the negotiations with the Commerce Corporation as like separating the city of Providence. The argument in Providence is do it everywhere.
So the Providence aspect of standardization for 195 came in when?
2015, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, but there's still variables.
On many variables.
Basis.
Absolutely.
And there's no absolutism that says, hey, listen, one size fits all. Everybody gets this.
That's true.
So as far as I'm concerned, it feels more like a suggestion than a mandate.
Yeah.
And you're right. The interaction on both the state level and the city is. I just don't understand why there isn't a standard rate card. But the governor's MO has always been, making individual deals, picking winners and losers.
That's right. And the flip side, though, to the argument of standardization, because I've covered it a lot. The council president Salvatore has been pushing this for several years now, long before he was the president. And the argument against it is, one of the things that is good about the one-off process in the city council is that you actually have to go in front of a public hearing. It gets vetted in committee, in public, where I'm there annoying everybody all the time. The current proposal doesn't have any of that. So it's saying, trust us, trust the tax assessor, whoever in the department.
Well, there's a whole lot more to discuss when somebody wants to put a development in or build something than just the tax rate.
Of course. Oh, there's
so why
many
wouldn't there
things.
still be a process by which anybody who wants to build in the city has to be vetted and
it's a great question.
due diligence?
It's a great question. It's one of the things that I've said to them. Look, my job's not to endorse proposals or oppose them, but I've said, you know, it seems like there's a way to get what you want done, but also have a pretty good public process so that you don't have me knocking on the door saying, why aren't, you know.
It's not complicated. It's like, hey, listen, you come in and tell us what you want to do in this particular neighborhood. Oh, by the way, here's the standard tax rate. Here's the development finance picture that everybody gets. So let's just move that aside. Talk to me about what you want to do.
The other
it's
challenge,
not that
though,
hard.
remember, the other challenge is you are in theory, you're creating, you know, think about all the people who currently pay the $36.60 tax rate.
Right.
You know, if they're already paying it, they're going to watch all these people come in, get some sort of incentive that lowers their taxes. You know, this is the Joe Palino argument. Though he seeks tax breaks too, he very much says, you know, look, most of my properties I pay the actual tax rate on.
All right.
So.
Speaking of, let's make the. By the way, that argument's always been in place.
Always.
Those who
Absolutely.
pay the current rate versus those who are incentivized. There's always
right.
The idea that there's a friction between business development and business retention.
Right.
Has always been a rub on a
That's
municipal and
absolutely
statewide basis. But
Yeah.
since you mentioned Joe, you know, he had a grand plan to come up with perhaps a Hasbro Superman building partnership thing, and it got leaked to the media, at least the online site, and that didn't go very well. Now he's got a little bit of heat on the council for a hotel tax break that he's looking for.
That's right.
How's Joe doing to open up 2018?
Look, if you talk to him, what he would say is, I want the same tax break that would be afforded to a new developer. I'm putting in this boutique hotel in the Kennedy Plaza area. My gut, something will come together and they'll figure it out and it'll move along. But, you know, especially when it comes to hotels, you get the hotel workers, the union there that wants to really fight over this all the time. He hasn't maybe played nice necessarily.
And there he is. There he is, by the way, on a walking tour of St. Joseph's Hospital, which might have been one of the more vivid memories I have of 2017, where he, assuming he was doing the right thing and acquiring the hospital property in the South End, just down, it's Broadway, right?
Yeah,
on Broadway. Thinking he was doing the right thing, helping on Broad, not Broadway, Broad. I've become a Rhode Islander. I don't remember the names of the roads anywhere, but I can certainly get there from here.
Where the hospital used to be.
Where the hospital used to be. He was devastated when that community turned out and said, "We don't want no stinking homeless, you know, facility. We've done enough for that population," and now he sits with that building a financial burden to his portfolio.
Yeah, he doesn't know
what's happening with that.
We have heard nothing about that, and you're so right. That is one of the things that sticks in my head from 2017.
What a meeting that was.
Yeah, and I remember...
We were both at it. It was unbelievable.
And I remember talking to him prior, and he was very excited about it. Had a fairly reasonable proposal. He had no idea what was going to hit him. I remember people walking out on him.
Like the governor,
right.
The governor was supposed to stand up and say something. She read the tea leaves on site and went, you know what, I'm out the back door.
And I remember the mayor kind of, you know, stood up and said, we won't let this happen at his own press conference. That was a eye-opening thing. I think it was one of the first times in politics, probably in his career, that he hasn't had real control of the situation going into it. And yeah, we haven't heard very much about it. I think he still wants to do it. He polled it recently. I don't have the results, but I know he was in the field polling questions about St. Joseph's and the mayor's race and other things.
All right, when we come back, tough story on the front pages this week about, well, it's about timing in a lot of ways. We'll be right back. How awful is this particular story, where this particular building in town was soon to be condemned by the building inspector who saw it, who heard the complaints, I guess it's a 3-story, 3-family, and he was kind of running it like a boarding house. And, you know, the power didn't work, the gas didn't work, things didn't work. He, on a Wednesday after the new year, says, yeah, you know what, this is bad. Thursday we get a storm. He figures, I'll write the report up Monday and get the process working. Saturday the place burns down.
That's right. Terrible set of circumstances.
Is that bad timing or delinquency? I'm not ready to go after the inspector, but you know more about the story than I do.
It strikes me as bad, really bad timing.
Just Murphy's Law?
I think it's, I think it strikes me as really bad timing. It also, remember, what a lot of people don't understand about this, and I understand why people are angry and stuff, is that the process of getting people out of that property and actually boarding it up and saying, you know, this thing, or potentially tearing it down, is not, you know, a snap your finger type of situation. The building inspectors aren't going to come in and say everyone's got to go. And by the way, even if they did and they board the place up, one, you'd have a lot of people saying you're sending people out in the cold. Two, as soon as everybody left, those boards would come down and people would move back in. That's the reality of many neighborhoods in this city, particularly that neighborhood.
All right, good perspective on that. A life is lost. And
tragic.
It just, how much of this stuff, how much of this blight do we have in the city right now?
So there's about 600 vacant properties. That's not even, that was a regular property in theory, just a troubled property. We are going through the process of asking about how many properties have been condemned, things like that. Don't have all that information. We know there's about 600 at any given time abandoned properties. This is the thing, remember, the mayor wants to take these properties and potentially, you know, give them to receivers and in a whole complicated process. It's a very difficult process. There's court, you know, remember, there's an owner to all these houses. So.
All right. What do we look for in 2018 from the city of Providence?
I think you're going to see, I mean, you're eventually the mayor's race will heat up. You'll see some inter-council politics, but I think it's going to be status quo, generally speaking. I think it's going to be a quiet year.
The mayor's race heats up, really?
I think it could. I think it could. I don't think it'll be, you know, it will because I'm going to cover it, so I'm going to have something to cover, right? But the mayor is
will it be hot and you'll be covering it, or will it be cool and you will create heat?
I will try to create heat, probably. No, the mayor's a heavy favorite today, sitting here today, to win re-election. We haven't seen anyone emerge that will be, you know, well-funded enough to do it. Kobe Dennis probably not.
There's only one announced candidate at this point.
That's right. Kobe Dennis, the
Kobe
activist.
Dennis.
That's right. Yeah.
Who's a well-respected guy.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Well-respected guy, but I don't know that he has the institutional support to figure it out. You know, look, John Lombardi, the state rep, is interested in it. Lauren Adrian from the East Side wants to do it. There's a couple of people that want to do it. But again, today the mayor's a heavy favorite to win re-election.
Incumbency is so powerful.
It is. It is.
People get comfortable shoe-minded, even though they say, I want to throw all the bums out, unless you've had interaction. Mayors have much more of a personal relationship with their constituents.
Sure. You have the ability, as the mayor, you have the ability to point at a pothole and say, fill it. That's really powerful, right? That's an important thing.
And they got a few of those.
Sure.
All right. Good update. Follow Dan at WPRI.com. Got to stay on top of the city and some of the state issues like the school village. Final word when we come back. Stay with us. Tomorrow we'll get a local perspective on the DACA controversy from the director of the Latino Policy Institute at Roger Williams. So be here for that. And I'll see you on the radio. Weekdays 3 to 6 on WPRO tomorrow. Have a great evening, guys.